Welcome to my presentations. Today, I will talk about constructor in Java. Let's have a motivation example to understand how important of the constructors. Think of a box. We have a box here on the screen. If we talk about a box class, then it will have some class variables such as height, length, or width. But when it comes to creating its object, the box will now exist in the computer memory. Then can a box be there with no value defined for its dimensions? The answer is no. So constructors are used to assign values to the class variables at the same time of the object creations, either done by the programmer or by Java itself. About the definition of Java constructor, constructors are used to create or initialize a new object from classes. It can be used to set initial values for object attributes via the parameters. It is called when an instance of the class is created. At the time of calling the constructor, memory for the object is allocated in the memory. And Java compiler will automatically create a default constructor, the constructor with no arguments, in case no constructor is defined in the class. But however, it is a best practice for the programmer to include the constructor within each class. So this is a syntax of the class, the constructor of the class in Java. We have class, random class, public, random class. About the constructors, constructors in Java have the following characteristic. Constructor has the same format with the methods, but don't have the return type. This is important. Constructors have the same name as a class, as you can see in the previous syntax example. When there are multiple constructors in a class, the arguments specified for each constructor became the distinguishing point. This is called constructor overloading, which I will introduce to you later. There are two types of constructor, non-argument and parameterized constructors. Since constructor have the same format with the methods, but they are quite different. So the constructors must have the same name as a class, while it's not necessary for the methods in Java. Constructors do not return any type, while the methods have the return type or void if it does not return any value. Constructors are only called at the time of the object creations, while method can be called any number of times. Let's talk about the non-argument constructors. A constructor that has no parameter is known as the default constructor. If we don't define a constructor in a class, then the compiler creates a default constructor. But once again, as I mentioned above, it is the best practice to define the constructor within every classes. If we write a constructor, then the compiler does not create a default constructor anymore. We have a sample code about the non-argument constructors. We have a class, my class, and in the constructor, we have the statement print out the constructor code. So each time we create the object, here we call the object, the instance is called my constructor. The output will be constructor code because we have evoked the constructor of class my class. So about the parameterized constructor, a constructor that has parameters is known as the parameterized constructors. To initialize fields of the class with our own values via the parameters. As you can see here, the constructor takes two arguments, which are the parameters. First one is string and the first one is integer. The sample, we have the sample code here. You can see a class student. We have the constructor take two parameters, name and ID. Here, the object I pass in JaWeee and 393. And when I print out the student one name and student one ID, we got the output name JaWeee and ID 393 when we pass in through the constructors. Now, the most important topic that comes into play for the OOP is known as constructors overloading. So similar to method, constructors can be overloaded for creating different objects in the same class. Compiler differentiates the constructors based on the numbers of parameters, types of the parameters, and the order of the parameters. We have a sample code about the constructor overloading here. As you can see, this class animal has three different constructors. The first one is constructor without one argument, string argument. The second one is constructor with two arguments, string and integer. And the third one, we have the constructor with one argument with different type, integer, different from the first one. So I got three objects, evoke three different constructor of the class animal. And the output you can see on the screen is totally different based on the different constructors. Now, in order to understand more about the constructors, I would like to introduce two common concepts about constructors. The first one is copy constructors. Assume that we have a class student and we want to create an object for 10-year-old Bob student. Then we want to make a copy of that object for another student who is also named Bob, but the age is 20. Now, can you guess the output? Surprisingly, the output is Bob 20 and Bob 20. This is because instead of creating a total new object, this sample code creates a second instance that has the same memory locations of the first one. So when we change the information of the second object, the information of the first one is also be changed. Now come to the copy constructor come to the play. Similar to C++, a copy constructor in Java is a constructor that creates an object using another object of the same Java class. That is helpful when we want to copy a complex object that has several fields, or when we want to make a copy of an existing object. But unlike the C++, Java doesn't have a default copy constructor if we don't write it our own. So to create a copy constructor, first we can declare the constructor that takes an object of the same type as the parameters. I will show you later in the sample code. Then we will copy each field of the input object into the new instance. As you can see here, C is a copy constructor. It takes the parameter is an object of that class. So in this sample code, the student 2 is a copy of student 1 by we have this statement student 1, the parameter still 1, and the output will be Bob 10 and Bob 20, which is correct. The second concept I want to introduce today, and also the final, is a private constructor. A private constructor in Java is used to restrict the object creations. If a constructor is declared as private, then its objects are only accessible from within the declared class. It limits the number of objects of that class to 1. The private constructors in Java is used to create a singleton class. A singleton class is a class in Java that only have one object. So in the sample code of the private constructor, you can see a singleton class. We have the private constructor here, which can be a set outside the class. And we have a method that creates the instance for the singleton classes. So in the main class, you can see A and B is two objects of the singleton class, but actually it's point to the same object. So when I have this statement change the x variables of the object A, but the value of A and both A and object A and B is also been changed to 20. And that's all for my presentations for the Java constructor. Now come to the problem set about the constructor in Java. I have prepared a problem set, and here we go. We have to create a Java file named basic info Java, which consists two classes, a default classes person and a public class basic info. In the person class, create three instance variables named age, birth, name, age, and birth, which are basic information of a user. Also define method this info, which it prints out his information. So in the method, we need to do the constructor overloading to do the following operations. If users only enter by the name, the program prints out the customer name and indicate that there's no information about his age. But if the user enter both name and age, print out their name, age, and birth year, and then create an instance of class person to get this sample output. Okay, let's do some coding. Here, I have prepared a little bit something about the problem. We have the class person, and we have the public class info. I have prepared two constructor. First one is with two parameters, and the second one with one parameters, and this info method. So the problems ask us to create three class instance variables, name, age, and birth. Here we go. Okay, I have created three instance variables. For the first constructor, we will assign the parameters that the users passed in to the instance variable. So the problem also, as you remember, the problem also asks us to calculate the birth year of the users when they give us their age. So I will use a package calendar to calculate the birth year of the user. First, we need to import the package. And here is the syntax. Okay, and we will calculate the birth and assign it to the instant variable. Don't forget this. Don't forget this one. And for the second constructor, we will assign the value that the user pass in to the instance variable. Okay, we have done for the constructor. For the display info, we have to distinguish when the users input an age or not. So since the default value for integer is 0, so if the age is still 0, which means the user have not input the age, we print out the name. Your name is name. And we also need to indicate to the user that there is no information about their age. Okay. And for the other case, we need to print out both the age, the name, the age, and the birth year. I'll copy this one down. Your age is age. Your birth year. Now let's create two customers. First one is named Adam, and who is 20 years old. Adam, 20. Oh, sorry, 20 here. And the second person named Bob, but with no name, no age, sorry. So we have to display the information of these two customers. P1, oh, sorry, this one should be P2. P1, this, and print out the information of the second person. Let's try to run this program. Oh, sorry, we don't have, I got a mistake here. It should be string name. Yes, and we got the correct output. The birth year of the Adam when he's 20 years old is 2002. And this is the answer for the problem. Thank you for listening. This is the end of my presentations. Goodbye.